Welcome to the Case for Mystery Bookshop. We're so delighted today to have the second part of our writing class that we started several months ago. And I'm going to let Marcia introduce herself, and I'll let Claudia introduce herself, or Marcia can tell you maybe a little bit about her if she gets with us here. But before that, I need to remind you of a few things. The event is being recorded. It will be put up on our YouTube channel. And the reason we tape it is because some people might want to join us, but they can't for whatever reason. So you can see it on YouTube. If you don't wish to have your face as part of the video, please turn your video off or place something over your camera. Please keep your mic muted for the duration of this event. So make sure you mute your mics, because I can do it, but then you can turn around and accidentally put it back on again. So I'd rather you guys mute them. When the time comes for questions and answers, Barry, please type your questions in the chat box for the authors to review. And so those are basically the little rules. I'll make a couple of announcements real quickly, and maybe I'll give Claudia a couple minutes to get in. We have several things going on at the shop right now, or will be coming up.
Hey, your camera's over here.
We're doing a sale all the month of February. We're doing a puzzle sale. So we'll have puzzles at, what are the puzzle prices?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I'm sorry. How much? What's the deal on the puzzles for February?
20% off all puzzles in the store.
20% off all puzzles in the store. And we're going to have a donate to library. Library month is February. So if you buy 2 new books, we're going to have a big pile of new books that Debbie just never bought one time or something. You know how she is. And we will choose one of those books to donate to a library. And we will also have blind date with a book. And those are books where we actually wrap them up with a little present. And we'll put a brief description of the book on a piece of paper in front of it. So at least you get an idea of what the book might be like. But we're hiding the cover because covers sell books. And sometimes we think that a lot of really good books are just picked up and put back down because it's not the best cover. So, and that's very, these blind date with the book is very popular here. So we'll have those in February for you to choose from. And that's what's going on here in February. We are the bookstore for Malice again this year. It was very
that's wonderful.
Yes, we were asked again. Right. You didn't learn anything last year when we were there. They asked us again this year. But
are you working with Verena Rose?
I work more with Sean, and we'll have a vendor person named by that time.
Yeah, they're great.
Verena, good. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Verena, Level Best actually handles the consignment books. I do ones that are published, and not that self-written are published, but if you publish it yourself and we can't get it from a publisher,
this is probably Claudia. Go ahead.
Oh, I hope.
So we can start, and I can introduce Claudia, and if she gets to join us, it'll be great.
Okay, and just a reminder, everybody needs to mute their mics. Not everybody has muted their mics. Okay, Marcia, we're ready to go. Hit it.
Okay, hi. Well, I'm representing both Claudia, Riess, and myself right now. Hopefully Claudia will join us by phone. She's had a glitch getting onto the Zoom event, so I apologize. We spent a lot of time planning our talk for part 2 and going over it. And so I've got all her notes. Claudia is very big on, when you talk about those of you who've written books or are thinking of writing books, whether it's mysteries or whatever, people either ask, are you somebody who plans ahead? Do you plan what every chapter is? Do you plan, how the book is going to go? Or are you what's called a pantser, where it's kind of just organic? So I'm wondering if maybe that's Claudia on the phone.
I'm here.
Oh, great. So I'm just talking about our different. Okay, so I'm just going to be introducing us and our different styles. So you're very much more organized than I am. And I'm just kind of like, I know that there's always going to be murders and that they're going to be solved and there's stuff in between. So in terms of introducing myself, and then I'll have Claudia introduce herself, which is what you asked. I've written my new book coming out is 11 books, 9 of them mysteries. And the other books I've written are both nonfiction. So I'm sure that, that Deb will talk about what our books are about. I always have strong woman characters. That's really important to me. And there's always a gangster or two involved because of my life experience with my father and the people that I met because of him and through him as I was growing up. So, Claudia, before we actually get started into our talk, do you want to talk about just briefly what your background is?
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, I started out, I worked for a while at the New Yorker in the editorial department, but I started writing not romance, but more, stories involving men and women as opposed to the art mysteries, which I started a couple of years ago. And I'm now working on my 5th in the series, which will probably be 6 books.
Right.
And it's been characterized as an art history mystery series by Level Best Books. And my latest one released is To Kingdom Come, and it involves pivots around the Benin bronzes, which are possessed by museums all over the world, and presently Nigeria and other countries that were had their artifacts and art taken by the British and other European countries when they were colonies. They're trying to have them all returned. So my mystery is around that.
And I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. That's all right. That's all that's needed
well,
here.
What I was going to say, because as
yeah.
Claudia, those of you who are listening and watching, as Claudia was saying, what hers are, it brings us into how we wanted to start, was that there are a number of different kinds of mysteries, and Claudia's is kind of a combination of maybe I think maybe you'd call it classic, and and
it's a hybrid.
A hybrid of classical
Yes.
and historical. Where mine are mostly cozies, and there's so many different types. There's noir, which all of us we've seen the old black and white noir films, The Thin Man and The Maltese Falcon, and those are the noir kinds of mysteries. And then there's true crime. And there's police procedures, and there's thrillers. Stephen King writes thrillers, so we write different kinds of mysteries, and yet there's a lot of things in terms of our character development that Claudia and I talk about and stuff. So I think one of the things that Claudia, we had talked about how we would present this, and
yes,
there's all these types of mysteries and subgenres, but now there's like 4 different kinds of class of elements, which Claudia was going to talk about.
Okay, I just wanted to add a footnote to your introduction about the different types of mysteries. I think we should always be alert to the fact that the complexion and the content of all of these mysteries changes with time. It evolves with scientific development and social milieu. So I mean, we have to be very much in the immediate in the immediacy and looking at things and studying and observing. For example, Bernard Spilsbury who was called the father of forensics, and he was a pathologist in the early 20th century, and his autopsies were groundbreaking in the field of crime, and so one has to adapt.
So how would you adapt
I
those to the elements that you're talking about? Characters.
Well, I mean, if you're trying to solve a case, you have to know all the elements and the wherewithal that are at your disposal. You have to be up to date, and so a thriller written in 1930 is not going to be a thriller. We have more devices
ways to solve-
analyses
there's more ways to
at
solve
our
them right
disposal.
now.
Yeah. Yes. Right. And even World War I introduced, the analysis of poisons and the whole idea of studying exit wounds and entry wounds came from, World War I and the horrific things, and injuries incurred then. Okay,
Right.
so I just wanted to mention that. We were talking about the elements of mystery, and I think basically we can say there are characters, plot, dialogue, setting, and I'll just start with saying a few things about characters. Excuse me?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so when we're talking about characters, I'll say a few things about characters, and then I think Marcia would like to add. If you have a solo sleuth, I think you have to keep in mind that he or she has to have some distinctive characteristics or personal quirks. I mean, we've all watched mysteries on TV, and one the star of a series is an alcoholic, a recovering alcoholic. Another has had a tragedy in his or her life, all kinds of things. But in order to produce a character that you can relate to and that is individual and yet resonates universally, you have to have some very specific characteristics and distinctive. And in when there are twosomes like Marcia and I have, you really have to think of the dramatic byplay between them, and you have to have some contrasting characteristics, like one is daring, one cautious, one is cerebral, one is instinctive. And in this way, they can both complement each other,
But somehow
and
they connect with each other, which is good. Yeah.
And they also can clash. But of course, the main thing when there's a twosome, they have to share a common goal or an interest. In mine, it's solving an art mystery, and in yours, it's more the the noir kind of dark mystery taking place. That
was in the Senior Sleuths. There was very much like the noir.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the other thing about characters is the secondary characters, and I think one keeps in mind that there have to be some interesting red herrings, and those are characters that appear guilty but turn out to be innocent. And I don't think one should be aware that one should not hit the reader over the head. And I sort of coined the phrase here. Well, I didn't coin the phrase; it's already been used. But in this video, it's new. I think we have characters that appear innocent but turn out to be guilty. They seem to be helping the protagonist and so on. And I think I'd like to call them catfish. And I think that I have used there's another factor here when we're talking about characters, and that's point of view. And on occasion, I have the perpetrator or some other character, some victim who's about to be murdered, something like that. I throw in another point of view in a short chapter or two, and I think that's a good device for tension producing. And then I discovered another reason how this is used, or why this is used. I was reading a book. I won't name the author, but I was reading this book. It was a mystery, and it was very sort of obvious who the killer was. or if it wasn't obvious, there were only two, possibly three people who it might be. And there were a couple of red herrings that were hitting you over the head, so you knew that it could be them. And all of a sudden, there's a chapter where you know who the murderer is. The protagonists don't. You get everything from his point of view, and suddenly you're involved, and you're fearful for the protagonist. So, I mean, it's a great way to, get the reader's adrenaline going if it appears to be dragging or it's not very challenging to think of for the reader to think of who the guilty person is. Okay, I think you should add your ideas about character here.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Claudia.
Right.
Claudia and I are good friends, and we talk a lot about writing mysteries, and obviously our mysteries, are still so different, and what the stories, and we'll talk a little bit about plot next. I know Claudia had put some notes about, which are really good, but my characters in my series, it was the Senior Sleuths, was very much like Claudia said, noir, from the old, the characters were Dick and Dora Zimmerman, named after Nick and Nora Charles from The Thin Man, which I loved. And I tried to bring some of that in, but anything that I write, the new book that I've written, which is a cozy mystery that takes place in New Mexico. And the thing is that there's several things that are always just really important to me. One is having very strong, smart, intuitive female characters. It's part of who I am, and I just believe that's important. In the Senior Sleuths, I love that the main character, we're older, because there's no reason us people who are over a certain age can't be, clever and smart and accomplished and adventurous. But I also like to add in some humor, and
me too.
Exactly, right. So I think humor, is important. It's always important, thinking about what the reader is going to like. What is the reader interested? What are you who are here now? What appeals to you, whether it's writing or reading a mystery? And it means we want to be able to keep you going, like Claudia said. We want to make sure that you keep being interested and intrigued and trying to figure out who the murderer is. And I loved in my new book that my publisher said, I had no idea who the murderer is until you exposed who the murder was. It was, oh, good. So, you feel like, okay, trying to keep the reader moving and humor. And like I said in the introduction, and certainly in the Senior Sleuths and in this new book, Murder at the Zoo, it's called An Agatha, Raymond, Sherlock, and Me Murder Mystery. And these famous voices are talking to the main character. There's always a gangster, and it's part of the thing, that truly my father was a gangster, and people go, no. And I was like, well, yeah. And, I grew up and, I think we grow up in certain environments and we don't think anything of it until maybe we're older. But I met interesting characters as I was going up that I was able to put in a book. There were friends he had, like Johnny the Jig and Gimp and Doc. And I was like, okay. So I created some of that in the books because he was also a very loving, lovable person in my life. So anyhow, for me, writing the characters in a cozy, and if, the difference is like everybody's watched, Murder She wrote, and that's a cozy mystery where the main character is not a professional detective or police person. It can be a woman, it can be a man, but in a cozy, that's where the character is. And there was a lot of good ones on Hallmark Movies and Mystery, Murder She Baked and all of those off of the Joanna Flute books. So that's kind of the characters, and certainly like Claudia said, having red herrings and all the things that we bring in. I always have a number of murders in my books. Right? It always never starts. Right? It starts out with one kind of weird murder and then more. But Claudia, maybe we could let's go into talking, as time is passing. I mean, we could talk about the plot, what you have to say about plot and subplots, okay?
Oh, okay. I kind of like to begin with a bang. I usually begin with a prologue that either it strikes you with some sort of mystery that's going on in the past, possibly, and chapter 1 you see how it's evolved in the present, or a murder, and you're not sure why this person was murdered, and then in the first chapter, which brings us back to the present. With our sleuths, you sort of find out things. And a perfect person for this kind of discussion is Robin Cook. He writes these medical mysteries, and he is very, very formulaic. And he starts out always with somebody is either being killed or is dying from some exotic illness or something having to do with the medical profession that Robin Cook can go off on. And but it does get your juices going, and also I always have a subplot. My protagonists are always involved in something in their personal lives, and sometimes the main plot and the subplot arc together. Sometimes they diverge. But I know, for example, Robin Cook, in his subplot, his two protagonists are medical examiners. So they do autopsies. Well, she's the head of New York. She's the chief medical examiner in New York at this moment. But their children have problems. I think one is autistic and the other has another problem. So, I mean, there's a subplot going all the time, and it's evolving all the time. But Agatha Christie is an interesting example. All of her notebooks, I think, have come out recently, and they discovered that she listed scenes in order, and then when she writes the book, she jumbles them up to, I guess, obviously to give excitement and unexpected twists and turns. Yeah. Oh, what?
Oh, okay. I was just, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh.
Christie's technique. So she does like to confuse the reader, which her books are fabulous, right?
Yes. And one thing that's always said about her, she was a great listener and observer.
Yeah.
And it's very important. I said before about knowing the new techniques in solving crimes and everything. She was the listener and observer and traveler, and she traveled a lot to find her plots, and very, very observant.
Okay, well, my plots sort of start in a way like Claudia's. And my prologue is always a very maybe half page of a murder, and then takes you into, there's always certainly with the new book there's a romance, and there's subplots like Claudia says, to what is happening to keep in interest, like in the murders she wrote is because it's a cozy. There's a subplot of baby lions being born, and so I've written a couple articles about how to write a book with animals as the characters in it while there's murders, but you still want to care about them. But if you're looking at different plots, there's like some people, the famous series Columbo always started, like Claudia saying, hers and mine, with a murder. And you saw who the murderer was, and then everything went from there, that you watched him, show the murderer that he knew who it was. So that was one way. the very famous British series, Midsummer Murders, which I love the British murders and mysteries. And they start out with a murder, but it's a very big mystery. But the thing that I love about what they do is, if you watch, there's so much about location, and they show the landscape around the villages in Midsummer and the little towns. And so I think location is really important. And we thought we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of writing. But again, plot is, they're so different from, like Claudia's talking about, in Agatha Christie, to Stephen King's, who's, I don't enjoy thrillers. I don't enjoy watching Criminal Minds, but they're a huge success and people love them, right? I love I love certain of the British ones, and I like that they have humor in it. Like Claudia says, she likes to add, and I do. So that's one of the things, these British mysteries just have this, like, sometimes sardonic, humor, and while people are killing each other all over the place. So. Yeah. So anyhow, I think what we wanted to do was go from that into, knowing, and what we want to do is open this to questions. If you want to ask us questions while we're talking, Claudia and I are welcome you to do that, or if you'd rather wait to the end, it's up to everybody, Deb.
Well, I guess we can just talk about, a dialogue for a bit.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about just our own experiences with dialogue.
Yeah, I have to start with a quote from Hemingway. Good dialogue is not real speech; it's the illusion of speech. And Elmore Leonard shortcuts. He drops ifs and conjunctions and punctuation, like had a tire iron, we could find out in 10 seconds. And the rhythm is so important. And an example of cringeworthy dialogue is some stuff from Robin Cook. I have to tell you, and this is bringing up another point, that you really should develop your strong points and really highlight them, because that's what Cook does. He's got his medical knowledge, and so he has interesting plots. But I have to read you this one quote, this one dialogue, and one of the cringeworthy quotes. The protagonist is very close friends with a person who's just been killed, and I'm not giving any spoilers away because it happens at the very beginning. Okay, she's in good health, great health. This is a total surprise, out of the blue, a very, very close friend. Okay, her husband is calling her to give her this news, and he says, I hate to be the messenger, but your dear friend Sue Passero is downstairs in the cooler needing to be autopsied. Good Lord, Laurie responded. That's awful news. What on earth happened? Now, if that isn't the most unnatural dialogue.
It's like, what? What was that?
It was an exact quote from this from the book.
Okay.
And he also goes on and on in his dialogue in an expository way, explaining all kinds of things in medicine in a very unnatural way. And I think when dialogue is good, like Ernest Hemingway, you almost don't have to describe what the person is doing. Or if you say one thing, somebody, looked down at her lap, you don't have to say she was sad or something. I mean, you can say things very tersely and very dramatically. And I think rhythm is very important. I always like to put the joke or the high point or the surprise at the punchline, so to speak, at the end of the sentence, And I don't know, I discovered this when I was going over a rough, and I realized something is wrong with this sentence or that sentence. And I realized I had to turn it around so the impact would be at the end. A perfect example of this is a paraprosdokian. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a statement with an unexpected ending. And one example is from Stephen King. I have the heart of a small boy in a glass jar on my desk.
Sounds gross.
Yes.
It's total Stephen King.
But I mean, you know, like if you're saying, for example, she got a smack when she was expecting a kiss, it would be more impactful if you say she was expecting a kiss, got a smack. She ate the cat instead of the cookie. Yes, instead of the cookie, she ate the cat. You know what I'm saying? It's the rhythm and where the impact comes, I think, is important, and it helps the flow of the dialogue. And
I was going to say, you know, for me, I think Claudia is better at dialogue, or at least has been, more to it in many ways than I've been. That's been my most difficult because I owned a marketing and PR agency for many years, and you'll just learn. You write a press release, you know, it's like what, you know, where, what, when, how, you know, so everything is very tight. And I love a phrase that also that we could use that came from Hemingway through Gertrude Stein was less is more. And that's very much my style. For me, you know, less is more.
Oh, absolutely. And and Leonard is good. Is that as well? Elmore Leonard, who was inspired by Hemingway.
Well, you know, and I like that whole phrase about less is more, and it's just how I am in a lot of things. But you know, when Claudia says she goes back and looks at something, I go back and I've had other things when I worked with editors. Two things. One is I go back and I eliminate the word that as much as possible.
Yeah,
people like they did that and that was this. Most of the 99% of the time, you don't need the word that. And the other thing
yeah.
Well, you know, I've had this thing where with one editor in particular that I worked with, where you know you're dialoguing, and it's so obvious who said this and who said that, but they want you to say, she said, you know, and he said that, and she said this, and he said, and she said, and I think it's boring to keep doing he said, she said.
Well, that I noticed that in that Robin Cook book. That everything is he said, she said. I think that this might be maybe because for the audio book, they were told to do that. I don't know. But there are two quotes from Elmore Leonard on spareness. I try to leave out the parts that readers tend to skip. And also, if it sounds like writing, I rewrite it.
Yeah. So I think what we're trying, both Claudia and I are saying from our own experiences, from our things like whether it's less is more, Elmore Leonard, you know, I you know, it's terrible. Every time Claudia says Elmore Leonard, I apologize. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. I keep thinking of Elmo from
Elmo.
I'm thinking of Elmo from
I hope it didn't sound like Elmo.
I know. I keep visualizing Elmo from Sesame Street.
Oh no, Elmore.
I know it. I thought we'd bring a little humor in, but I do. I know. Of course, I realize that. But at any rate, there's all these different things. You know, I don't know if you're interested in writing, any of the people in today, but these are things. And you know, having a really good editor, both Claudia and I are just real fans of having a good editor. But then when you've done all of this and you've written your dialogue and it comes back and you've had an editor look at it, you don't have to always agree with them, you know. And as I said, I had this editor who did he said, she said, he said with the dialogue, and that didn't work for me. So okay, all right. So moving along, we wanted go ahead, Claudia. We wanted to talk about exchanging ideas on settings, which I'm really big on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, talk.
Thank you. Okay. After the whole Elmo debacle, I'm like, okay. Well, the thing that I've done, especially with Murder at the Zoo, and I did it with all my the first books were in the Hamptons and took place, and then the Senior Sleuths in different locations. But this one, taking place in New Mexico in the zoo, and then you think about, a murder, Murder on the Orient Express. There's so many different places for a good location. They can be on trains, on buses, on boats, on, if you look at the location for the movie, the Rear Window, the location was just his apartment, right? Looking across at other apartments. Sherlock Holmes, all of his, they're all over the landscape and countryside. And then there's ones that are like Oxford Park, and what is the other one that's on PBS, that these big estates that people so location is really important. And the thing about, for me, I was a entrepreneur and businesswoman for many years, and owning a marketing PR agency. And when you work with somebody, it was always used to be years ago, like before Claudia said, all the technology, it was location. So it isn't so much that in business, but I do think location
Yes.
is really important in writing a book. So Claudia, what are some of your thoughts?
I think in going a corollary to that is getting the weather, the time of day, that could affect the mood. It's important, a part of the character of a setting, and it sets the mood. Like the book I'm working on, there's a murder that it's pouring rain. It's outside. The victim is lying in the rain. The visibility is terrible. The people who are witnessing are drenched, and the sun is going, the sky is darkening, and the whole mood is dark. It really affects the whole mood of the situation. And it also reflects the the mood of the individual as well.
Well, I think if you say there's cloud, the sky is dark because there's clouds. I mean, like in New Mexico, as I was writing it, they're on this road to Santa Fe. The sky, the clouds, it's really dark, but yet they're looking off to the right and they see the mountains with snow on it. So it's creating this whole feeling and emotion. Absolutely. So I think,
and it's reflected in the characters' thoughts and
their feelings, their emotions as you're writing it. You're able to do that.
And also, as we all have seen, and there are so many tropes having to do with weather. People are all huddled together in a snowstorm. They can't they're trapped, and murders take place, or they're forced to take a detour because a tree fell in their way or something. So I mean, all sorts of plot twists and turns can come from weather conditions and just the ambient conditions.
My simple phrase about location is that location in writing a mystery is character. And you want to make sure how just all the things that Claudia was saying, if it's raining and all, this is a character, and how does it affect the people? How does it affect the main characters? How does it affect the story? I mean, it's cloudy and rainy. Are you foreshadowing is really such a big thing. Are you foreshadowing that there could be an accident? Are you foreshadowing something sinister happening? But at any rate, I'm very much paying attention to time. So I know that we both wanted to talk about the writing process itself. And I see there's people that had questions. And Deb, do you want us to continue, or do you want us to answer some questions?
About 1 minute more?
Okay, go. We have about a minute more, and then we're going to answer questions, Claudia.
Okay.
So just about your writing process.
So, I'm just going to talk briefly about the writing process itself.
Sure, for whatever.
Okay. I'm things that I've learned. I think we should know our strengths and weaknesses. As I said before, it's very important, and I think Robin Cook is a perfect example of that. He has his definite weaknesses, But I'm being very snobby here and saying and criticizing him. Yet I get his books because I like reading them, because his plots are great, and he knows medicine, and they're very interesting plots. So I think he stays in tune with his passions. I think one of the most important things to remember is that our strengths generally coincide with our passions, and it's important to always stay in tune with them. And in that way, I think we inject life into our stories.
Right. And what I was going to just add in terms of the writing process is to, similar to what Claudia is saying, is to make sure you're writing in your own words and in your own voice,
yes,
and in your own truth. You need to know the power of words, know the power of whatever message you're giving, whether you're writing or talking to somebody, and, knowing within the book how the words challenge situations. And we both like to be clever. I mean, we talk a lot. And we both like to be, clever and funny. And, you want to avoid any plagiarism. We had made a list of things like this so, if you, whatever your writing process is, as I said, some writing processes, and I think Claudia does this more than I, in planning. You kind of plan what the book is, planning maybe what chapters are. I don't. As I said, I know there's going to be a number.
But then I throw it, and it changes completely.
Right. And then it changes, right?
And then right before I went crazy with not being able to get on Zoom, I changed my plot, and I had to scribble it all down, or I'd forget it. And then so
exactly. What I do is not. I mean, I love to write on pink pads and purple pads and blue pads. right. And I'm writing wherever I am. I used to write more like in a coffee shop, and not so much since the pandemic, but more of that. And then I would type it, and then I type it out, and I probably do rewrites and edits at least 8 or 9 times. I write it, then I type it on the computer, then I print it out, then I edit it, then I go back. Then it's like changing the plot, changing the character, the different things. So, again, we want to make sure we have time to answer your questions. But one of the things
you want to bring up the practical part?
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the things.
Okay, you talk about that.
Okay, well, one of the things, Claudia, I wanted to make sure that we did talk about, so that if you have questions about it, are some of the practical aspects of writing, editing, and publishing. And if you have any questions about that, how do you find a publisher? What's a good self-publisher? What are some good, marketing, from Goodreads to Espresso to Goddess Fish blogs, which are really good, NetGalley. Be aware of scams. Once you start getting emails about writing, there are dozens of scams, and just make sure you have a support, network that you can say, hey, what do you think about this? And there's all kinds of other things in terms of writing. But again, I'll go back to one, aside from your own writing process, one of the most important to get a good book out is to have a good editor. And I mean, I know my first book, I did not have a good editor. And I'm like, I was grateful, actually, Level Best Books reprinted it with some better editing. But the thing about it is, you just want to make sure that, there's all these practical aspects that Claudia and I would be glad to answer. So I'm going to leave you to lead us to questions, Deb.
Okay.
We should. Okay. Do you want to mention the two self-publishers that are really good?
Well, the Troy Bookmakers is the best self-publisher.
Yeah, and Archway was pretty good too.
They are good, but they're much more expensive than the Troy Bookmakers. So you're right.
What were those two again, please?
I really like, for self-publishers, I would highly recommend the Troy. There were the Troy Book Tours Makers, and they're out of Troy, New York. And they're an excellent self-publisher. They do what they say they're going to do. They have a couple bookstores where they put your books in if you need, And
Buffy's book, Buffy had, remember her, she has books with photographs, colored photographs, and all different kinds of font, with Level Best Books, which is not a self-publisher. I can't do half that stuff.
No, it's
I
very
mean, I
different.
couldn't put in another font, use another font for emails or something. So
I know, but
this is a
the
beautiful
difference,
book publisher.
I know, but the difference of having being self-published and having a traditional publisher, one of the main values, of course, is the distribution. You don't get the distribution with a self-publisher that you do like you've got with Level Best Books. So, okay, questions, Deb.
Okay, we have a question. What do you do when a plot isn't working and you're stuck?
Claudia, why don't you take first and I'll go next?
Okay.
Or I'll be glad to.
That's cute. Go. You want to go? You want to answer?
Yeah. I just keep. If it isn't working, I stop. I look at it and I just rewrite. I mean, for me, it's not complicated. I just go, okay, this isn't working. I don't like the way it is, and I'm going to rework it. What does it need? Different characters, different location, a different voice to the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and what was mentioned before, you might want to throw in a chapter with a different point of view. It could this person could be the culprit, and who could remain anonymous or not. And as I said, in this book that I was reading, it was really dragging, and suddenly there was this chapter with this murderous person suddenly exposed, and actually he was one of the catfish in the book, so it was a little bit of a surprise that he turned out to be the murderer, and then you're worried that he's going to kill one of the protagonists. So I mean, you might just I don't know if the questioner is talking about if you're writing a mystery or just writing in general.
It can be either way, but more than likely a mystery, since these are all mystery fans too.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes if you remove a chapter, it really tightens it up. I've done that on occasion, and because I realized like 3 consecutive chapters, the middle chapter didn't need to be there. There maybe were 1 or 2 facts that I had to insert in the chapter before and the chapter after, and it's amazing how it tightens up the prose.
Right. Okay. Next, Deb.
Okay. Next question up. Can you give examples where editors really helped you, and where they helped, and where they didn't help?
Okay. I'll be glad to start with that, because a good editor will really help you by not only making sure they do good copy line editing, which is, that's definitely not one of my skills. I know Claudia is better at that than I am, but that's not a skill set that I have in terms of, making sure that everything is correct in terms of spelling and grammar and punctuation. But they will also, a really good editor will point out you might need a transition here. A really good editor will make suggestions, without, saying that, this is what you need to do. A really bad editor just wants to take your book and rewrite it. That's for me. And I mean, really, and I had one editor with my new book that's out that said, this is a terrible idea. I don't think you should do it like that. And I said, how much do I owe you? Goodbye. So, Claudia, you want to give a quick response about an editor?
Yes. I think it wasn't an editor. He was the publisher. But I had a word that I wanted to use. I used it, and he said, "No, I don't understand that word," and he forced me to give it up. And sometimes, that helps when it helps put the brakes on yourself. Sometimes if you become your own really strict editor, and you read and a word seems phony or it seems arch, just get rid of it. Don't hang on to a word or sentence that you're just, it's so precious It really says exactly what you want,
But it doesn't belong there. It just doesn't belong.
Get rid of it. Yes, you have to. Yeah, I think that's what a good editor will make you look at your own work and feel. I don't know, free enough and confident enough to strike out things. And actually, Stephen King says that he writes his first draft in 3 months, and then his second draft he tosses out at 10%. And he said, if you don't toss out 10%, you're not trying hard enough.
Okay. Okay, Deb.
Okay.
These are great questions. Thank you, everybody.
Aren't they
Yes.
wonderful?
Yes, thank you.
These are some of the best questions we've had. Okay. What was your favorite location for one of your books and why?
Claudia, why don't you?
That's interesting. Ooh. Well, I think in these art mysteries, I think when one or both of the protagonists go off to either Paris or London, I find sort of a vicarious thrill in doing that, and it's kind of fun to research areas that I've never been in, and I have to make it sound real and personal. So I guess when I was in London in To Kingdom Come, I like what I'm saying. When they were working on a mystery in London in the last book, To Kingdom Come, I enjoyed that.
Well, Claudia and I have both lived in the Hamptons, so she'll appreciate it. I loved my first series was called Dying to Be Beautiful, and all 4 books took place in the Hamptons. And that was kind of fun to do it because, I had lived there, and as Claudia knows, I mean, it's a beautiful place, but there's a lot of strange characters. So, right? Yeah. So that was, I enjoyed doing that because I could bring in the beauty of the place and the craziness of the characters that live there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have, I think, one more question, and that's all I see so far. Okay.
Oh.
Do you have a murder/plot in mind first and then pick a location to suit, or have you picked the location first?
Claudia, do you want to? Me too.
Well, I think I try and get an idea of what I want to happen first, and I like to juxtapose contemporary characters that might have gotten together or have something in common or not, and it's a peculiar relationship, like Marcel Duchamp and the chess player who was probably killed in still a cold case. And I think I discovered that they had played on the chess team, the Olympic chess team in 1933. I never knew that at all. I didn't know that Duchamp, the artist, was a chess player. And I came across 2 quotes: Duchamp saying that chess is an art, and the chess player, the master chess player, saying something comparable as far as his perspective of chess. And I had to get these 2 together. So it wasn't the location. The location came after. It wasn't the murder. It was this peculiar juxtaposition of characters.
I think for me,
but sometimes murder comes first. First, sometimes I think of a murder that I'd like to see take place, and that because it will generate all kinds of questions.
I think I like to do location where a place is familiar. Mm-hmm. And this last book, my new book that's out, which is the subtitle "Murder at the Zoo," takes place here in New Mexico. is because of living here. And I wanted to join the writing organization, Women Writing the West. I thought, okay, so if I'm going to do that, I need to write a book that's the murder takes place in the West. And, I knew a lot about New Mexico. I've lived here off and on several times. So I knew how to go to Santa Fe, and I knew how to, I knew what the visual was between it. So I knew for me and with this book, but I think with most of them, as Claudia was talking about, what she was just saying, I think for me, it's been a combination. There's going to be a murder.
Yeah. Oh.
I think she's
I
frozen.
lost you. I lost you.
I think we're frozen.
Oh, okay. Hi, Deb.
How you doing, Claudia?
Oh, I put on lipstick. I'm wearing a nice scarf.
So you really dressed up for us today, huh?
Oh, I almost burst out crying. I didn't know what to do.
Oh,
I'm so happy that I was able to talk to you anyway.
well, so are we.
Oh
My goodness.
And now I don't know what to do about this Zoom thing. They weren't letting me register. I don't know. They kept saying my password was wrong or so. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Well, that's
I don't know. I know.
I think we totally lost Marcia.
Oh.
Maybe she'll try to come back in again here in a minute. It's 1 minute till 3, so we'll be closing out in a second anyway. We'll give Marcia another second maybe to reconnect here.
Okay.
And if she doesn't, then we'll close out here. But
okay. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't see any of the guests. Or it feels one step more remote.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
If you can't see.
It sure does. It sure does.
Oh.
It does. It's hard. It kind of, you have to go into kind of a different mode of thinking.
Yeah. Oh, but the questions were really good.
Weren't they fabulous? Oh,
very thoughtful and yeah.
Okay, so I'm back.
All right.
I'm sorry. I was like, oh my God, it couldn't wait 5 more minutes. Well, the weather here has gotten bad, and so I was concerned it might happen. So I apologize, and I thank you so much for inviting us to participate.
Yes, thank you.
And the one thing I'd like to say, Deb, is if anybody has more questions, if they email them to you and you send them to us, I know Claudia and I would be glad to respond. We'd be delighted to. Whether it's about writing or editing or the practical questions about publishing or marketing ideas, we'd be delighted to.
Well, we are delighted you ladies joined us again. This is quite informative.
Thank you.
And lots of good information. And a little humor never hurts with it, too.
I know Elmo.
That's okay. I like Elmo, so it's not a big deal.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It could have been worse.
I know.
I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank everyone who joined us.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you
yes,
all.
Thank you. If anybody's there within hearing, thank you so much for those great questions.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. Thank you so much. Okay, and send us questions if you want. We're glad to respond. Okay, thanks everybody. Stay safe and dry. What's crummy weather going on?
You too, guys. Take care, everyone.
Good luck. Stay safe.
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.